Hi, this is another MegaSplat development log. This one's a little different in that basically I have an idea for something and I kind of want to know whether people think it's useful. Um, so if you're pretty familiar with MegaSplat, you'll know that what a lot of people do is use what I call a two-layer shader. And normally you paint on the bottom or the top layer. And so the problem with this is when you paint on the same layer something's painted on, it just instantly switches to that texture on that vertex because of the way the shader works. And then what you do is you switch to the top layer and you select some other texture, and now you can sort of blend this texture in, right? So this has sort of been the workflow for quite a while. It works, you can get some great looks. But I've always kind of wanted something that felt a little more natural, which is kind of how the other technique that most people use, the standard sort of splat map technique, works. Um, so I had a user who was doing some stuff at runtime and gave him this suggestion, and then I basically just decided to try to implement it and see how it went. And it's kind of interesting. I'm not sure if it's yeah. I mean, here I'll show you it. So basically, if you go to this new mode called auto, what this will do is look at the current splat mapping data and try to figure out what layer to paint on so that you're always blending into the new information. Now, it can't always do this 100%, but if you have an area here where I have a texture cluster painted down, so you don't really notice the tiling, but I have everything on one layer, and now I paint in some moss here, and I probably need to up the flow. You can see it works just like I'm painting onto the top layer. And then if I go and let me just paint a little more of this. Let me turn up my flow a little bit. It's pretty low. All right, so here we go. We paint some grass down, and this kind of does what you want, right? But it feels really natural, and it sort of blends in as you paint. And if you were going to give somebody runtime control of stuff, you would want it to blend in like this. So then I can just select another texture, and I don't have to set my layer or anything, and it all just blends in, which is great, because this is kind of what you want. And again, I can turn my flow down and blend just a little of this in if I want. And so that all works. And that's cool, because you don't have to think about your layers anymore. You don't have to know what layer something's on, which I think is a big sort of pain with this painting, with this shader technique. So the problem comes is that you still have that fundamental limitation of one vert per texture per layer. Or sorry, one control point, whether that's a vert or stored in the texture. I'm using the mesh workflow here because I can see these verts, so it makes my debugging much easier. So when I paint on this, I still have that fundamental limitation, which means if I bring in a third texture here, and let me find one that's going to stand out, like shore sand, and I paint over this, you'll see it tries to do a pretty good job. So I start painting over here, and I bring it in, and then every once in a while you'll see it just can't figure out what to do. So what it does is it looks at the data, and it basically says, oh, okay, I'm trying to blend this in, but I'm out of layers, right? I only have 2 layers. So what I'm going to do is just take over the lowest weighted vertex. And this sounds really simple in concept, but it was pretty tricky in code to get this working correctly. And so basically, as I paint here, you can see it come in, but you'll see that some other little areas will sort of pop in. So that's just sort of the limitation of the technique that's happening. But I think this is a much more natural workflow for painting than having to manually manage your layers. So I basically decided I would make this quick video, and if you have some comments or thoughts about it, let me know, because I'm thinking of including this in the next update. It is a bunch of code changes, so I really want to debug it a lot if I'm going to release it. And I think that since the texture cluster stuff is now working at runtime, I can basically expose some of this to let people do this at runtime. So if you're doing a app that involves users painting, you could use a 2-layer shader, and they could just paint using this technique, and they wouldn't have to know about the layer system, which is nice. Again, you can see the little visual artifacts here. of it running out of layers and basically just going, well, I'll just make that that lower, the one that has the lowest weight, I'll just take that over with my new texture. But overall, it seems to work pretty well. So let me know.